guys, it's Underdog Performance Horses here, and it is late tonight. However, I did want to get this video filmed. I am currently screen recording, and today we are discussing basic hoof terminology, and this will be good for any equine horse owners or anyone wanting to learn more about the basics of the hoof. This doesn't cover everything, but this covers the basics. If you would like me to delve more into it, please let me know and I would be happy to do so. I am a certified massage therapist as well as a certified BWFA farrier. And today we're just going over a couple of basic terms, and if you would like anything else on anatomy or any other discussions, I would be happy to answer any questions and do more of these in the future. So let me know if there's anything else you want to see. But let's go on to our first slide, which is the sensitive versus horny. The outside structures such as wall, sole, frog, and white line are hard or horny parts of the foot which protects from impact. Inside the hoof are many sensitive structures such as lamina or the inner sole and frog, which lie underneath the horny of these versions. Blood vessels and nerves are all sensitive, the inner portions of the hoof, while the horny is outer. Horny can be trimmed, rasped, and wear and tear without causing lameness. The insensitive portion of the hoof. Sensitive portions of the hoof should not be trimmed or cut, as this will cause bleeding and possible soreness. The white line. White line, which is not to be confused with the white line disease, is part of the hoof that can be seen on the bottom when you go to pick out their feet. It is the buffer between the wall and sole, which unites the two of them. It is a softer horn that is safe to file down during a trim. If you shoe your horse, you'll see your farrier looking through the holes of that shoe, the nail holes where they nail the nails into. They'll look into those holes to make sure that they are on the white line. They can see the white line through it, because that makes for a correct and proper fit shoe. In sizes, it is 1/8 of an inch. And the white line also attaches insensitive lamina. Oh, guinea pig is making noise. Robin, thank you. It is about 1/8 of an inch thick, and the white line also attaches insensitive lamina of the wall to the sensitive lamina of the coffin bone. One thing I do want to point out is a lot of the time they think that the inner wall is the white line, when in reality, if you see in this photo, it is actually this yellow line behind that inner wall, and the white line isn't often perfectly white. In fact, it is more of a cream or a yellowish color, and you can see it right underneath that red, where that red ends, in the cut, sliced open hoof. Next up, we have the bars. And I actually just answered a question about the bars and where they're located the other day. So a lot of people don't even realize that the bars are on the horse and that it is separate from the sole. Bars are typically level with the heels. And keep that in mind, it is level with the heels, not the sole. Almost like an extension of them as they shorten down the frog. Following the frog cleft till about halfway down, and it slowly levels down to even with the sole, until there is no more of the bar. The bar should be longer than the sole, because we want them level with the heel and not the sole until it bevels down, and it should not be that much longer. The bars support the hoof during the loading period and prevent too much extension of the hoof vertically. The bars also provide traction and aid in stopping as the bars dig into the ground with the hoof. So you can see the bars there. I'm going to zoom in. This is on a severely overgrown hoof, so it's a lot easier to see on an image but you can see how they are with the heels and they travel down that frog cleft to that point of the frog, and ideally we'd want it level with that heel and start to bevel down until it's even with the sole, and then it fades off. So here's a diagram, and then here's another example of where you would find those bars, and they slowly level down from the heel into the sole. Oops. The sole, there is sensitive sole and horny sole. Now the horny is what you can touch, what you can feel on that outside of the hoof. The sensitive, you cannot touch or feel it unless you cut too deep, or if you have a euthanized horse, you will see, just like in this image, where you can slice the foot in half and see that. So the sensitive sole is a thin layer of tissue on the lower surface of the coffin bone inside the hoof. It is covered with papilla that creates the horny sole. You can also find papilla over the surface of the coronary band. On your horny sole, it is on the earth surface, which is the part of the hoof that touches the ground. It is hard, dry, and brittle. As the farrier trims away, it gets moist and flexible. Your farrier should not trim beyond that point. It is thicker as it gets closer to the white line, which you can also see here if you look at the sole on the bottom. Whoops. The sole should be cupped rather than flat to avoid the foot hitting completely flat. It also allows the sole to descend as the foot bears weight. You want to keep minimal pressure on the sole. So a lot of times people shoe to take the pressure off the sole so that the wall takes up most of that pressure. You can see the sole. You'll often see the farrier take their knife to the sole. They'll use their rasp to cut down that sole. So that where the arrow is pointing is the sole all the way around till you get to the heels and the wall. So now we have the frog. The sensitive portion of the frog covers the plantar cushion and is covered with horn secreting papilla, which creates the horny frog, which is soft horn, which means it is still horny, but rather than being hard and brittle, it is more of a rubbery feel. It sheds twice a year and should be trimmed minimally to avoid overgrowth, but not too short. This is because it provides circulation for blood flow during loading phase as well as traction. It allows the hoof capsule to expand and contract during weight bearing. Right here we can see the entire frog, the central cleft or the central sulcus, which is that part where you really got to dig your hoof pick into, right through the center line of it. The frog cleft, which is in between the frog and heels where it dips in, which is also called collateral clefts or sulci. And the frog cleft follows that bars down on the outsides of the frog where it dips down. And then your point of the frog or apex of the frog, which is that very center point right before we hit the sole. This is the part where you're going to take your hoof pick a lot too, as shown here. Oops. How many times am I going to do that? Heel bulbs. The heel bulbs are the rounded area at the back of the hoof where the frog meets skin. It is soft horn tissue, and inside holds connective tissues, creating a springy feel. It is delicate and can be prone to injury during overreach. So that's why a lot of barrel racers use bell boots, or you'll use bell boots in the pasture, not just to protect the shoe, but also to protect those heel bulbs. The wall, it grows at an equal rate all the way around, and the growth is downward from the coronary band and also nourished by both the coronary band and earth surface when there is moisture. It is strong but capable of expansion. The wall must be carefully and consistently trimmed to avoid severe overgrowth. And so you can see the wall both on that whole front of the hoof, but also before it hits the white line. So you have your wall, and then it completely stops at the white line. and then that is where the sole starts, if you're looking at it from wall, white line, sole. Or if you're looking at sole, you'll have your sole, and then it'll end completely at the white line, and then you get into your wall. The periopal, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, is soft horn secreted from the periopic ring covering the coronary band. It hardens after exposure and creates a protective covering of the wall and prevents evaporation of hoof moisture. And so a lot of the times you'll see farriers take the rasp to the front of the hoof. It makes a much cleaner look, but usually you start messing with that periopal, which not everyone likes. I personally like that cleaner look, but a lot of people say I don't want that front of the hoof shaved off to protect the periopal and prevent the evaporation of hoof moisture. So, but the periopal always comes back. Now we have the coronary band, which is a continuation of skin which joins the hoof with the hoof wall. It covers the coronary bone and lower rear portions of lateral cartilages. Farriers must be careful around this band as it is very sensitive. It is covered with papilla that secretes horny tissues of the wall. And the coronary band is what produces hoof growth. So here's an example. This hoof is, I did it again. This hoof has clearly been moistened, either with water or some kind of protective or disinfectant. So that is why that white line is so much easier to see, which is the main reason I put that picture. But you can also see how easy it is to injure, and usually once you injure a coronary band, it is very hard to fully heal. So, and here it is with a completely dry hoof. There are 3 bones inside the hoof. We have the short pastern, the coffin, and the navicular. And so I'll give you guys a second to see that there, and then I'm going to zoom in. So right here, if we're at the very top of what we can see, we have the long pastern, which is phalanx 1 or P1. What you can't see is on top of that long pastern bone is the cannon bone, and I'm sure you guys know what the cannon bone is, but if not, let me know, and I can definitely delve more into that in the future. But the cannon bone, you have your splint bones, and that's where you see most of the tendons. So that is what we cannot see, and then underneath we have our long pastern. That is not inside the hoof, and that's why it's not included up top. But I do find it important to discuss the long pastern because we have that joint between the long pastern and the short pastern, and that creates phalanx 1 and phalanx 2, because underneath the long pastern we have our first bone in the hoof, and that is the short pastern, which is phalanx 2 or P2. There is one more name, but I am blanking on it right now. If I can think of it, I will comment it below. However, right now I am a complete blank on the third name. But this is only partially in the hoof, so if we draw our coronary band across, which I cannot do, but I'm sure you can assume where that coronary band starts, you can see that only the very bottom tip of that short pastern is inside that hoof, and so it has only recently been considered, I don't know if it's been the past 20 years or whatever, but it only recently considered a part of the bones inside the hoof, because it is just barely in there, but it is still in there, even if just barely. So then we get into our coffin bone, which is also called the third phalanx, or P3. You can also call it the pedal bone, or the distal phalanx. And so the coffin bone, if you have a horse that has foundered, you will see a dish in the front of the foot, and that is because when a horse founders, that coffin bone rotates and creates a dish, a lot of pain issues. It is not good when that coffin bone rotates, which can be from sugar or even stress. But that is a whole discussion for another day. Point is, that is the coffin bone, and it is very important to make sure that does not rotate. And then we get into our navicular bone, not to be confused with navicular disease. The navicular bone is in a bone in and of itself, and when that bone is injured, that is what creates what I call navicular disease, or just simply navicular. Now we get into the toe, heels, and quarters. So if we zoom in here, that is the toe, that very front of the hoof. If we're just looking at that bottom line, the toe is that very front or center part. The quarters are at each side, and the heel is in the back. So we have our heels, and you can see that at the very end of the shoe. And then the quarters, which is where we start to put our nails, and then we call them the nails at the toe, because right where the quarters ends and the toe begins, we have that center nail that leads to our center of the toe, which is where we call the toe. So that is a very good thing to keep in mind when you're talking to your farrier. I believe I do have a little bit I want to read here. If a horse is dragging their toe, this is one thing I noticed with my horse with knee arthritis and my other horse that has a little bit of a lameness issue with his knees due to overuse before I got him. So if a horse is dragging their toe or landing toe first, which is associated with lameness issues or arthritis, the toe will appear to be more square. Now, sometimes we do solve issues with horses by squaring the toe, so you might physically make that toe square, but if the toe is naturally becoming square, then there might be a lameness issue or arthritis. Ideally, a horse lands heel first if it is sound. If you see a foundered horse or a laminitic horse or laminitis, the horses often land, they say toe first. However, a recent study by, I'll have to get his name, found that they often also land quarters first, which puts a lot of pressure on the soles. So you definitely don't want them quarters first, which pretty much they land flat-footed. So this causes a lot of pressure on the toe or the sole if they're landing toe or sole first. If a horse is balanced, they will land heel first, and ideally with equal weight on both sides of the heel. Now we get into the seed of corn, and I save this for last because I will guarantee you very few of you guys have heard of seed of corn. I personally never even heard of it till I got to farrier school, because we don't talk about the seed of corn very often. And it is pretty much what ties the heel and the bars together, and it's right kind of just above where that arrow finally finishes pointing, but that is also just barely like the very end of it. I think this picture shows it best, so you can see the bars there where that kind of shadow is above it. And then you see your heel, quarters, wall, highlighted in yellow there. And that red spot is obviously where the seed of corn is, which you can also call the corn. So not many people talk about that. I thought that was kind of interesting. So here we have a little bit of a fun fact, because I wanted to delve more into the tendons, but I was like, this is getting pretty long, and also it's 1 a.m, so let me just put in a little fun fact about tendons. And so I was actually just talking about this the other day, because I think it is so interesting talking about this kind of stuff, and it's always at the back of my mind, because I'm like, this is actually really interesting, because it is the same way for people. And I'm going to try not to get into a long rant here, but me and my friend and trainer were talking about the effects of posting at the trot, and how we are extending our leg up and moving our body up, which is why we'll feel it through the front, the front of our leg. Long story short, I don't want to get into a long tangent here, but tendons run down the leg and through the foot. The flexor tendons are in the back of the leg and flexes the leg back. And so an easy way to remember that is flex equals back of the leg brings it back. So I always say flexor tendons are going to flex back, bring the leg back. Extensor tendons are in the front of the leg and extend the leg forward. Extend equals forward, front of the legs, bring it forward, extend forward. Extensors attach to the top of the coffin bone. Flexors run through the sesamoid bones and over the navicular, attaching to the bottom of the coffin. So if you guys want more, because that is going to be the end of today, I am more than happy to do more. This was really fun to work on, and I think it's just very interesting and very important for even if you don't want to get into an equine career, you as an owner should be able to know the basics of what your farrier is talking about. Your farrier should be open to answering questions and making sure that you understand the care that your horse needs, and that when he is trimming something, you know, like, okay, this is what he's trimming right now, and it looks good. You know, it's good to know your terminology. So, and I do want to throw out my sources. I used just a little bit from the 2 websites there, just to get a little bit more about the bars and the heels, because the books did not have a lot of information on them, and I didn't just want to say, well, I learned it from school. So, but the main sources I used to create this was Horse Hoof Care by Cherry Hill and Richard Claymesh, which I just started that book. It is great for horse owners. It is pretty much aimed at horse owners, and there are a lot of good diagrams, really good book. I'll probably do a book review soon on that once I finish it, but that's going to be a couple months from now. And then Elements of Farrier Science, which I just did a book review on my YouTube, so you guys can check that out. And that is by D.M. Canfield, and that is a also very good book. Lots of information, a little bit trickier to understand for horse owners, but you should be able to understand. There is a lot in there about forging and how to shoe and how to properly trim. So it is aimed at, you know, people like wanting to be farriers, but if you are a horse owner watching this and want to get as much information about your horse as you can, that is a book to look into. There's a lot of breed specific stuff in there, really good book. So both of those are very good books. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and if you would like to set up a farrier or massage appointment, please let me know. I am located in Southeast Michigan, but I can travel within 3 hours, you know, in any direction, depending on the amount of horses I get. So, thank you guys so much, and, well, I'll see you guys.